The morning Admiral Sarah Chen received the evacuation order. Earth's sun still shone bright through the reinforced windows of Luna Command. She stared at the blue marble below, watching white clouds swirl over continents that had been humanity's home for 300,000 years. In 6 hours, that would all change forever. "Ma'am, the Galactic Council's enforcement fleet has crossed the Jupiter line," reported Lieutenant Morrison, his young face pale with disbelief. 700 ships, all Dreadnought class or larger. Sarah nodded grimly. The Council had made their ultimatum clear 3 months ago. Humanity had violated the sacred laws of expansion by developing faster-than-light communication without permission. Their punishment was exile from their homeworld, immediate and permanent. No appeals, no negotiations, no mercy. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity's greatest achievement had become their greatest curse. Dr. Elena Vasquez had cracked the quantum entanglement code that allowed instant communication across any distance. It should have been celebrated across the galaxy. Instead, it terrified every major power in the Council. "They're afraid of us," Sarah whispered to herself, remembering the closed-door briefing she'd attended on the Council homeworld of Zentari Prime. The Zephyrian Empire, rulers of the galaxy for 12,000 years, had built their dominion on controlling information flow. Their relay networks took weeks to carry messages between star systems. Humanity's breakthrough could make their entire infrastructure obsolete overnight. The Aquinas Federation had been equally horrified. Their trade monopolies depended on being the only species capable of navigating the treacherous hyperspace lanes efficiently. Human FTL communication could guide any ship safely through what they called the demon routes, breaking their stranglehold on interstellar commerce. Even the normally peaceful, Christine collective had voted for humanity's exile. Their entire society was built around slow, contemplative decision-making that took months to coordinate across their worlds. The thought of instant communication threatening their ancient ways had driven them to support the harsh punishment. Sarah watched the tactical display as evacuation ships lifted off from Earth's surface. Every major city, every small town, every remote outpost was being abandoned. 12 billion humans loading onto whatever vessels they could find. The lucky ones had secured passage on proper transport ships. Others crowded into converted cargo haulers, mining vessels. Even decommissioned warships pressed back into service. "How many are we leaving behind?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Latest estimates put it at 40,000, Morrison replied, his voice cracking slightly. "Remote researchers, deep space miners, exploration crews beyond recall range. They'll never make it back in time. Those 40,000 souls would face the Council's justice alone." Sarah had seen what happened to worlds that defied the Galactic Council. The Zephyrians had a particular talent for making examples that lasted millennia. The evacuation hadn't been a complete surprise. Elena Vasquez had suspected the political implications of her discovery from the beginning. She'd convinced Earth's leadership to prepare contingency plans, secret shipyards in the Kuiper Belt, hidden supply depots scattered throughout the outer system. When the Council's ultimatum arrived, humanity was ready to run. But running and thriving were two very different things. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the lead Council ship," Morrison announced. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the intimidating form of Zephyrian Fleet Commander Kethvar. His species looked like a cross between a praying mantis and an armored knight, with chitinous plates covering most of his body, and forearms that ended in razor-sharp talons. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a civilization that had conquered half the known galaxy. "Human Admiral, you have 1 hour to complete your evacuation. Any vessel remaining in this system after that deadline will be destroyed without warning. Any attempt to return will result in the complete sterilization of your former homeworld." Sarah straightened her uniform and activated the reply channel. "Understood, Fleet Commander. We'll be gone within the hour." "See that you are." Kethvar's mandibles clicked ominously. "The Council has been generous in allowing you to leave at all. Do not test that generosity further." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah staring at the blank screen. Generous, as if forcing an entire species into exile was some kind of mercy. "Ma'am, we're receiving emergency signals from the Mars colonies," Morrison reported. "They're having trouble with their atmospheric processors. The evacuation ships can't land safely. Reroute the heavy lifters from Europa Station," Sarah ordered, "and send word to Commander Rodriguez. I want every available shuttlecraft deployed to Mars immediately." This was the nightmare scenario she'd feared. With such a tight deadline, there was no room for technical failures or delays. Every minute lost could mean thousands of lives left behind. The next 45 minutes passed in a blur of emergency evacuations, last-minute repairs, and desperate improvisations. Sarah watched her tactical board as the dots representing human ships slowly gathered at the designated rally points beyond Pluto's orbit. Some of the vessels were barely spaceworthy, held together by emergency patches and prayers. Others were packed far beyond their safety limits, with families sleeping in cargo holds and engine rooms. "All ships report ready for departure," Morrison announced with obvious relief. Total count, 3,147 vessels carrying just over 11,953,000,000 souls. Sarah did the math quickly. They'd lost nearly 50 million people. Some had chosen to stay behind, refusing to abandon the only home humanity had ever known. Others simply couldn't be reached in time. Her heart ached for every single one of them. "Signal the fleet," she commanded. "All ships are to follow the Exodus protocols. No ship travels alone. No one gets left behind from this point forward." As the massive convoy began to move away from Earth's solar system, Sarah took one last look at the world that had birthed her species. The blue marble grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among countless others. The Galactic Council thought they were punishing humanity by forcing them into exile. They believed that cutting humans off from their homeworld would break their spirit, scatter them across the galaxy as refugees and wanderers until they eventually faded into irrelevance. They had no idea how wrong they were about to be. 23 years had passed since the Great Exodus, and Captain Marcus Torres stood on the observation deck of the colony ship New Geneva, watching another world transform before his eyes. The planet designated Phoenix 7 spun slowly below them, its red deserts and shallow seas taking on an increasingly familiar blue-green hue. "Terraforming progress is ahead of schedule again," reported Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the expedition's chief scientist. "The atmospheric processors are running at 127% efficiency. At this rate, we'll have a breathable atmosphere in 18 months instead of 3 years. Marcus smiled grimly. Efficiency had become humanity's greatest weapon in exile. When you couldn't rely on established trade routes or council-approved supply lines, every resource had to count. Every innovation had to serve multiple purposes. Every colony had to be self-sufficient from day one. The other species in the galaxy had expected humanity to struggle, to beg for readmission to the council, to slowly wither away in the darkness between stars. Instead, something remarkable had happened. Cut off from the constraints of galactic law and council oversight, human ingenuity had exploded into directions nobody could have predicted. "How many worlds is that now?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Phoenix 7 makes it 1,147 successful terraforming projects," Dr. Tanaka replied with obvious pride, "plus another 2,300 orbital habitats, 500 asteroid mining facilities, and 67 mobile shipyard complexes." The numbers were staggering. In less than a quarter century, humanity had spread across more worlds than most galactic civilizations established in millennia. They'd done it without council approval, without access to established shipping lanes, without any of the infrastructure that other species took for granted. They'd done it by thinking differently. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Chen," announced Communications Officer Lisa Park. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the aged but still formidable face of Admiral Sarah Chen. She was calling from the bridge of humanity's hope, the massive space station that served as the mobile capital of their scattered civilization. Behind her, Marcus could see the controlled chaos of a command center managing operations across hundreds of worlds simultaneously. "Marcus, good to see you," Admiral Chen began without preamble. "I need your expertise on something. We've just made contact with a previously unknown species called the Corathans. They're about to be annexed by the Zephyrian Empire, and they're asking for our help." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The Exile protocols had been very clear about one thing: no interference in council politics. Getting involved in territorial disputes was exactly the kind of behavior that could bring the full weight of galactic law down on their scattered colonies. "Admiral, you know what the council will do if they think we're interfering with their expansion plans." Sarah's expression hardened. "The council exiled us for developing technology they couldn't control. They scattered us to the winds expecting us to disappear. But we haven't disappeared, Marcus. We've grown stronger, and sometimes strength comes with responsibilities. She was right, and Marcus knew it. The reports had been filtering in for months now. The Zephyrian Empire was expanding more aggressively than ever before. Entire species were being absorbed into their military machine, their homeworld strip-mined to feed the Empire's endless appetite for resources. The Aquinas Federation was doing the same thing, using their trade monopolies to force smaller civilizations into economic slavery. What exactly are the Corethans asking for? Marcus inquired. Sanctuary, Sarah replied simply. They want to evacuate their population before the Zephyrians arrive. 700 million people, Marcus. They're willing to abandon their homeworld entirely, rather than submit to Empire rule. It was a familiar story. Over the past decade, 17 other species had made similar requests. Refugee populations that humanity had quietly relocated to uninhabited worlds in the galactic frontier. Each time they'd managed to keep the operation secret from Council surveillance. Each time they'd gained new allies and new perspectives that made their own colonies stronger. Where are we thinking of placing them? Marcus asked. Dr. Tanaka pulled up a star chart on her tablet. The Kepler 442 system has 3 potentially habitable worlds. We could terraform 2 of them for the Corethans while establishing our own research facilities on the 3rd. It's far enough from Council space to avoid immediate detection. Marcus studied the proposal. It was risky, but then again, everything humanity had done since the Exile was risky. Living in the galactic frontier meant constant danger from cosmic radiation, resource shortages, and hostile alien environments. Adding political risk to the mix wasn't necessarily that much worse. There's something else, Admiral Chen continued. Our intelligence networks are reporting unusual activity from the Christine Collective. They're mobilizing their deep space exploration fleets for the first time in 3 centuries. Our contacts think they're searching for something specific. Searching for what? Us. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. The Christine Collective was the most technologically advanced member of the Galactic Council. Their ships could travel faster than anything humanity possessed, and their sensor arrays could detect life signs from several light years away. If they were actively hunting for human colonies, it was only a matter of time before they found them. How long do we have? Marcus asked, unknown, but our analysts think we might have 6 months at most before they locate our major population centers. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her calculations. Admiral, what if we don't hide? Both Marcus and Sarah stared at her in surprise. Explain, Admiral Chen demanded. We've been operating under the assumption that discovery means destruction, Dr. Tanaka continued. But what if we're wrong? What if the real threat isn't being found, but being underestimated? Marcus began to understand her reasoning. You're suggesting we reveal ourselves deliberately, on our own terms, exactly? Think about it. We've built nearly 2,000 worlds in 23 years. We've mastered terraforming techniques that other species haven't achieved in millennia. We've created the most distributed civilization in galactic history. Why are we acting like we have something to hide? Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, her experienced mind weighing the possibilities. It's a hell of a gamble, Doctor. If we miscalculate, every human colony becomes a target. We're already targets, Dr. Tanaka pointed out. The difference is whether we face that reality as scattered refugees hiding in the dark, or as a civilization that's proven it can thrive anywhere in the galaxy. Marcus felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't experienced since the early days of the Exodus, hope mixed with defiance, the same combination that had driven humanity to reach for the stars in the first place. What would revealing ourselves actually look like? He asked. Admiral Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. I'm glad you asked, because I think it's time the Galactic Council learned what humanity has been doing with our exile. The Great Assembly Hall of Zentari Prime had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. Representatives from across the Galactic Council sat in their designated sections, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of alien biology and technology. But today all eyes were focused on the central podium, where a single human figure stood waiting to address them. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped forward. Her simple Earth-style diplomatic uniform, a stark contrast to the ornate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the other delegates. The woman who had invented faster-than-light communication was now humanity's chosen voice to the galaxy. Her presence here in the heart of Council space was already sending shockwaves through the assembled powers. Honored delegates, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems that rendered her words into dozens of alien languages. 24 years ago, you exiled my species for the crime of innovation. You declared us dangerous because we dared to think beyond the boundaries you had established. Today, I stand before you not to beg for readmission to your council, but to announce what humanity has accomplished in our exile. A ripple of agitation swept through the assembly. Zephyrian Fleet Commander Kethavar, now promoted to Supreme Military Advisor, clicked his mandibles menacingly. The Aquinas Federation's trade representatives shifted nervously in their aquatic support tanks. Even the normally serene Christine Collective delegates began to pulse with an uneasy light. Elena activated a holographic projector, filling the air above the assembly with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light suddenly appeared, scattered across the outer spiral arms in a pattern that made several delegates gasp audibly. These are human colonies, Elena announced calmly. 2,847 worlds and orbital habitats supporting a total population of nearly 50 billion human beings, each one built without council approval, each one thriving in regions you declared uninhabitable or worthless. The numbers were impossible. The Zephyrian Empire, with 12,000 years of expansion behind them, controlled fewer than 3,000 worlds. The Aquinas Federation claimed sovereignty over barely 1,800 systems. How had an exiled species with no support and no resources managed to surpass them in a single generation? This is preposterous, snarled High Chancellor Vexthai of the Aquinas Federation. No species could achieve such expansion in so little time. Your data must be fabricated. Elena smiled, and her expression contained something that made the assembled delegates distinctly uncomfortable. It was the smile of someone holding cards that others couldn't see. You're welcome to verify our claims, she replied smoothly. In fact, I encourage it. Send your best scout ships to investigate. You'll find that every one of these locations hosts a fully functioning human settlement, complete with defensive capabilities and industrial infrastructure. The Christine Collective's primary speaker, a being of living crystal who communicated through controlled light patterns, began to pulse with rapid questions. The translation system rendered its concerns into audible speech. The resources required for such expansion exceed the carrying capacity of any single species. How have you sustained this growth? Elena's holographic display shifted, showing shipping routes and resource flows between human colonies. The pattern was unlike anything the Council had ever seen before. Instead of the centralized hub-and-spoke networks that most civilizations used, humanity had created a vast web of interconnected supply lines. Raw materials flowed seamlessly from mining operations to manufacturing centers to agricultural worlds, with each colony contributing its strengths to support the others. We learned something during our exile, Elena explained. Centralized control is inefficient. When you scatter a species across the galaxy, you force them to become self-reliant. When you deny them access to established trade routes, they create better ones. When you exile them from the comfort of civilization, they build a better civilization. Commander Kethvar rose to his full height, his forearms spreading wide in an intimidating display. You speak of civilization, but what you describe sounds more like infestation. The galaxy has laws, boundaries, established orders. You cannot simply claim territory without council approval. Actually, we can, Elena replied with devastating simplicity. Your exile order specifically renounced any council claim to human activities. You cast us out beyond the boundaries of galactic law. We've simply taken you at your word. The legal implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. By exiling humanity completely, the Council had inadvertently granted them the same status as undiscovered civilizations beyond the galactic frontier. Under ancient galactic law, such species had the right to claim any uninhabited territory they could successfully colonize. But Elena wasn't finished. There's more, she continued. During our exile, we've made contact with 47 other species that exist beyond Council borders. Civilizations that you've never encountered, or that you've dismissed as too primitive to be worth your attention. They've all chosen to join what we call the Human Commonwealth. Another holographic display showed the scope of this alliance. Species that the Council had never heard of were now part of a vast interstellar community. The Corathans, saved from Zephyrian annexation. The Deltari Collective, whose unique biotechnology complemented human engineering perfectly. The silicate builders, whose crystalline architecture could create structures and environments too hostile for other species. Each member of the Commonwealth contributed their own strengths while maintaining their independence. It was a model of interstellar cooperation that put the Council's authoritarian structure to shame. This alliance represents over 300 billion sentient beings, Elena announced. We control approximately 1/8 of the galaxy's inhabitable worlds, and our territory is expanding daily. We've achieved all of this without conquest, without subjugation, and without the heavy-handed bureaucracy that defines Council space. High Chancellor Vexthai was trembling with rage. You dare to mock the institutions that have maintained galactic peace for millennia? Elena's expression hardened. Peace? Is that what you call the forced annexation of independent worlds? The economic slavery imposed through trade monopolies? The technological stagnation enforced by your laws against innovation? She gestured to her holographic display, which now showed refugee populations that the Commonwealth had rescued from Council expansion. Entire species that had been saved from absorption into the Zephyrian military machine or economic dissolution. Under Aquinas trade practices, we've provided sanctuary for 63 different refugee populations in the past decade, Elena continued. Species that chose exile over submission to Council authority. They're all thriving in Commonwealth space, contributing their knowledge and culture to our growing alliance. The implications were staggering. The Council wasn't just facing a successful rival civilization, they were facing a rival civilization that was actively undermining their authority by offering alternatives to their rule. Commander, Kethvar's voice carried a clear threat when he spoke again. You test dangerous waters, human. The Council has maintained order in this galaxy for 12,000 years. We will not allow that order to be challenged by exiled refugees and their primitive allies. Elena's smile returned, and this time it carried a distinctly predatory quality. Commander, I think you misunderstand the situation, she said softly. We're not challenging your authority in Council space. We're simply demonstrating that your authority isn't universal. The galaxy is much larger than you've ever imagined, and there are more civilizations out there than you've ever dreamed of. Some of them are quite eager to hear about alternatives to Council membership. The threat was clear, even if it was politely phrased. Humanity hadn't just survived their exile. They'd used it to build something that could potentially replace the Galactic Council entirely. The war began 3 weeks after Elena Vasquez's address to the Galactic Council, though the first shots were fired in the shadows of diplomatic space, rather than on any battlefield. Commander Sarah Chen, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and Supreme Commander of Commonwealth Defense Forces, stood in the war room aboard the massive dreadnought Indomitable Will, studying reports that confirmed her worst fears. 17 colonies have gone dark in the past 72 hours, reported General Harrison Okoro, the Commonwealth's chief military strategist. The attacks are coordinated and simultaneous. This isn't random raiding. It's a systematic campaign to cripple our outer settlements. Sarah examined the tactical display showing the affected systems. The pattern was clear and terrifying in its efficiency. The Council had targeted agricultural worlds and mining operations in isolated sectors, places where Commonwealth defenses were thinnest and where the loss would create maximum economic disruption. Casualty reports? Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. Preliminary estimates suggest 2.3 million dead or missing. General Okoro replied grimly. The attacks weren't designed for conquest, they were designed for extermination. No prisoners, no occupation forces, just complete destruction of infrastructure and population centers. Dr. Elena Vasquez entered the war room, her face drawn with exhaustion and grief. As the Commonwealth's Director of Diplomatic Relations, she'd spent the past 3 weeks in desperate negotiations, trying to find some peaceful resolution to the growing crisis. Any response to our latest diplomatic overtures? Sarah asked. Elena shook her head bitterly. Commander Kethvar was very clear. The Council considers our expansion an act of aggression that threatens galactic stability. They're demanding the immediate dissolution of the Commonwealth and the voluntary return of all human populations to designated reservation worlds within Council space. Reservation worlds? General Okoro spat. They want to turn us into zoo animals. It gets worse, Elena continued. They're offering amnesty to any Commonwealth member species that abandon their alliance with humanity. The Aquinas Federation has already begun economic sanctions against any civilization that continues to trade with us. Sarah studied the strategic situation with growing alarm. The Commonwealth's strength lay in its distributed nature and its economic cooperation between member species. If the Council could break those alliances through a combination of military pressure and economic warfare, they could divide and conquer the entire network. But humanity had learned hard lessons during their exile. They'd prepared for exactly this scenario. "General, what's the status of Project Deep Strike?" Sarah asked. Okoro's expression grew grim. "All systems are operational. We have 47 stealth probe ships positioned throughout Council space, each equipped with quantum communication arrays and advanced reconnaissance packages. If we activate the network, we'll have real-time intelligence on every major Council military installation. It was humanity's ace in the hole, developed in secret over the past 5 years. While the Council had focused on their traditional methods of warfare, massive fleets and overwhelming firepower, humanity had perfected the art of information warfare. Their FTL communication technology allowed them to coordinate operations across vast distances instantly, giving them a tactical advantage that no other civilization possessed. "There's something else," Elena added reluctantly. "Our deep cover agents in Council space are reporting unusual activity. The Christine Collective has withdrawn from the coalition attacking us. They're pulling their forces back to defensive positions around their core worlds." "Why would they do that?" General Okoro wondered. Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. "Because they've figured out something the others haven't. Elena, show me the intelligence reports from our agents in Christine space." Elena activated her holographic display, revealing data that made Sarah's blood run cold. The Christine Collective had been conducting massive defensive buildups around their homeworlds, but not against Commonwealth forces. Their weapons were pointed toward the center of the galaxy, toward Zephyrian and Aquinas territory. "They know," Sarah whispered. "They know what we're really capable of." The truth was that humanity's rapid expansion hadn't been accomplished through superior technology alone. It had been achieved through something far more dangerous: superior adaptation. Every world humans colonized became a testing ground for new techniques, new innovations, new ways of solving problems that other species considered impossible. The Commonwealth wasn't just a collection of allied civilizations. It was a vast experimental laboratory, where the combined knowledge of dozens of species was being synthesized into something entirely new. And that synthesis was accelerating at an exponential rate. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Vanguard station," announced Communications Officer Park. The main screen activated, revealing the face of Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now Director of Advanced Research for the Commonwealth. Behind her, Sarah could see the controlled chaos of the most advanced scientific facility in known space. "Admiral Chen, we've had a breakthrough," Dr. Tanaka announced without preamble. "Project Prometheus is ready for field testing." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Project Prometheus had been theoretical until now, a combination of human engineering, Corithan's quantum manipulation technology, and silicate builder crystalline architecture that could potentially revolutionize space warfare. If it actually worked, it would change the balance of power in the galaxy overnight. "What kind of field testing are we talking about?" Sarah asked carefully. "We can retrofit the Indomitable Will and 12 other dreadnoughts within 72 hours, Dr. Tanaka replied. "The new drive systems will allow faster-than-light maneuvering during combat. And the enhanced weapons arrays can punch through Council shielding like it doesn't exist." General Okoro was staring at the technical specifications with obvious amazement. "These performance numbers can't be right. You're talking about ships that could outrun and outfight anything in known space." "The numbers are correct," Dr. Tanaka confirmed. "But there's a catch. The power requirements are enormous. Each ship would need a dedicated antimatter production facility just to maintain operational status. And the quantum field generators require rare elements that can only be mined in the galactic core." Sarah understood the implications immediately. To field these revolutionary warships, the Commonwealth would need to establish mining operations in the most dangerous and heavily contested region of the galaxy. They'd be provoking a direct confrontation with every major power at once. "How many ships could we realistically support?" she asked. "With our current infrastructure? Maybe 50 vessels. But Admiral, 50 ships with this technology could stand against the entire Council fleet and win. Elena was studying the data with growing excitement. Sarah, this changes everything. If we can demonstrate this level of technological superiority, the Council might be willing to negotiate a real peace treaty instead of trying to force us into submission. But Sarah was thinking several moves ahead. The Council had already shown they were willing to commit genocide to maintain their authority. Giving them proof that the Commonwealth was becoming militarily superior would likely trigger an even more desperate response. Dr. Tanaka, I need you to accelerate the retrofit program, Sarah decided. But we're not going to reveal our capabilities until we're ready to use them decisively. What do you have in mind? General Okoro asked. Sarah's expression hardened into something that would have been familiar to any student of human military history. It was the look of a commander who had decided that defense was no longer sufficient. The Council wants to destroy us because they think we're a threat to their authority, she said quietly. Maybe it's time we proved them right. The Battle of Terminus Gate would later be remembered as the moment when the balance of galactic power shifted forever. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will as her small fleet of 13 retrofitted dreadnoughts faced down the largest armada ever assembled in galactic history. Commander Kethavar had brought everything. The combined fleets of the Zephyrian Empire, Aquanus Federation, and their allied civilizations stretched across 3 light-years of space. Over 8,000 warships representing 12,000 years of military tradition and technological development. It was a force large enough to conquer entire galaxies. Against them stood 13 human ships and their crews. Enemy fleet is maintaining standard attack formation, reported Tactical Officer Rodriguez. They're keeping their dreadnoughts in the center with screening elements on the flanks. Classic Council doctrine, Sarah nodded grimly. The Council was fighting this battle the way they'd fought every battle for millennia, with overwhelming force applied through predictable strategies. They had no idea what they were really facing. Communications. Open a channel to the Council fleet, Sarah ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Commander Kethavar aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Behind him, Sarah could see the massive bridge that housed nearly 1,000 Zephyrian officers, all of them focused on the task of destroying what they saw as a handful of refugee ships. Human Admiral, Kethavar's voice carried the arrogance of absolute certainty. You have brought 13 ships against 8,000. Surrender now, and I promise your crews will be allowed to live in the reservation worlds we have prepared for your species. Sarah's response was calm and measured. Commander, I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw your forces and return to Council space. This is your only warning. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion erupted in what could only be described as laughter. The idea that 13 ships could threaten the greatest military force in galactic history was apparently the height of comedy to the assembled Zephyrian officers. Admiral Chen, Kethavar's mandibles clicked with amusement. Your species has always been prone to delusions of grandeur. Today we will cure you of that tendency. All ships, commence attack! The Council armada surged forward, thousands of vessels accelerating toward the tiny Commonwealth fleet with weapons charging and shields at maximum power. It was a sight that should have spelled doom for any force foolish enough to oppose them. Instead, Sarah smiled. All ships, activate Project Prometheus drives, she commanded. Show them what Exile taught us. The 13 Commonwealth dreadnoughts simply vanished. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, chaos erupted as sensor officers struggled to understand what had happened. One moment they'd been tracking 13 enemy vessels. The next moment their screens showed empty space. Where did they go? Kethavar roared, his composure finally cracking. He had his answer seconds later as the Indomitable Will materialized directly above his flagship, its enhanced weapons arrays already locked onto the Eternal Dominion's bridge section. The quantum field generators that powered the new FTL maneuvering systems had allowed Sarah's ship to literally teleport through space, bypassing every defensive screen and weapon emplacement the Council fleet possessed. Impossible, Kethavar whispered, staring up at the human dreadnought through his bridge's observation ports. Sarah's voice echoed through his ship's communication systems. You made one fundamental mistake, Commander. You assumed that Exile would weaken us. Instead, it forced us to become something you never imagined. The Commonwealth ships began their attack in earnest, flickering in and out of existence as they struck at the heart of the Council formation. Traditional naval tactics meant nothing when your enemy could appear anywhere on the battlefield instantly. The massive Council fleet found itself unable to coordinate defensive fire against opponents who could strike and vanish before return fire could be targeted. But the real devastation came from the enhanced weapons systems. The combined technology of multiple Commonwealth species had produced energy weapons that could punch through Council shielding like tissue paper. Ships that had been considered invulnerable for thousands of years were being cut apart by weapons fire that seemed to ignore their defensive systems entirely. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than our computers can track," reported a panicked Aquinas Federation officer from his position in the Council's combined command center. "The human vessels are destroying our dreadnoughts 3 at a time." The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the greatest military force in galactic history had been reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors. The Council had lost over 6,000 ships, including most of their command vessels and their most experienced officers. The Commonwealth hadn't lost a single ship. As the surviving Council vessels limped away from the battlefield, Sarah opened communications with the scattered retreat. Her message was broadcast across the galaxy through quantum communication networks that reached every civilized world within hours. "This is Admiral Sarah, Chen of the Human Commonwealth," her voice carried clearly through the static of damaged communication systems. 25 years ago, you exiled my species because you feared our innovations. Today you've learned that your fears were justified." She paused, letting the weight of that statement sink in across thousands of worlds. "But we didn't come here to conquer you. We came here to demonstrate that the galaxy is large enough for more than one way of life. The Commonwealth offers cooperation instead of domination, innovation instead of stagnation, freedom instead of control." The political implications of her words were staggering. Every species that had ever chafed under Council authority was hearing a direct challenge to 12,000 years of established order. Every civilization that had been denied membership in the Council because they were deemed too primitive or too dangerous was learning that there were alternatives. "The Commonwealth extends an invitation to any world that seeks independence from Council authority," Sarah continued. "We offer protection, alliance, and the freedom to develop your own potential without interference from galactic bureaucrats." It was a declaration of war against the entire concept of centralized galactic authority. But it was also something more. It was an offer of hope to billions of beings who had never been allowed to reach their full potential under Council rule. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days of the broadcast, 17 Council member species had declared independence and requested Commonwealth protection. Entire sectors of space began breaking away from central authority as local populations realized they had alternatives. The Christine Collective, the most technologically advanced Council member, shocked the galaxy by formally withdrawing from the Council and requesting negotiations with the Commonwealth. Their decision triggered a cascade of defections that left the remaining Council powers scrambling to maintain control over their remaining territory. But perhaps most significant was the response from Earth itself. The Zephyrian occupation force that had controlled humanity's homeworld for 25 years found itself facing planet-wide uprisings as the human populations left behind during the Exile rose up with the knowledge that their people had not only survived, but triumphed. The Great Exile was over. The age of human dominion was just beginning. Commander Kethvar, aboard his crippled flagship, stared at the tactical displays showing the disintegration of everything his civilization had built. In the span of a single battle, the natural order of the galaxy had been overturned by a species they dismissed as primitive, refugees. His final transmission to the remaining Council forces would become one of the most quoted statements in galactic history. "We didn't exile the humans. We freed them." 50 years after the Battle of Terminus Gate, the galaxy bore little resemblance to the rigid hierarchy that had once dominated interstellar civilization. Admiral Elena Vasquez, now in her 100th year but kept vital by Commonwealth life extension technology, stood in the observation deck of the massive space station Liberty's Heart, watching the controlled chaos of the busiest spaceport in known space. Ships from hundreds of different species docked and departed in a constant stream. Zephyrian traders hawked their wares alongside former enemies, Aquinas merchant vessels loaded cargo destined for worlds that had once been beyond their reach. Even Christine collective research ships shared berth space with human exploration vessels, their crews working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old council system. "Hard to believe this was all empty space when we started building here," commented Dr. Marcus Torres, now the Commonwealth's Secretary of Interspecies Development. At 93, he moved with the careful dignity of age, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. Elena smiled, remembering the early days when Liberty's heart had been nothing more than a dream sketched on the back of evacuation protocols. The space station now stretched across 12 cubic kilometers, housing nearly 50 million beings from 200 different species. It had become the unofficial capital of what historians were already calling the Commonwealth Age. The quarterly expansion reports just came in, Marcus continued, consulting his tablet. "We've established 14,000 new colonies in the past year alone. The growth rate is actually accelerating. The numbers would have seemed impossible to the leaders who had planned humanity's original exile." The Commonwealth now controlled roughly 1/3 of the galaxy's habitable worlds, with new territories being added daily as exploration fleets pushed into previously unknown regions of space. But the real revolution wasn't in the territory claimed. It was in how that territory was governed. "Any word from the Andromeda expedition?" Elena asked. Marcus grinned. Dr. Tanaka's latest transmission confirmed successful establishment of the first permanent base in another galaxy. The journey took 18 months using the new generation quantum drives, but they found 17 potentially habitable worlds in just the first system they explored. Intergalactic travel. It was an achievement that the old Galactic Council had declared theoretically impossible. Yet human ingenuity combined with the diverse knowledge of Commonwealth member species had made it routine. Humanity was no longer confined to a single galaxy, let alone a single world. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Elena. The Council's attempt to contain human expansion by forcing them into exile had instead unleashed them on the entire universe. "Have we heard anything from the remaining Council territories?" she asked. Marcus's expression grew more serious. "The latest diplomatic reports suggest the Zephyrian Empire is considering a formal request to join the Commonwealth. Their economy has been struggling ever since they lost access to our trade networks, and their military can't compete with our technology." It was a stunning reversal. The civilization that had dominated the galaxy for 12,000 years was now begging for admission to an alliance created by the species they'd exiled. The Aquinas Federation had already formally applied for Commonwealth membership 3 years earlier, acknowledging that their trade monopolies were no match for the free market cooperation that characterized Commonwealth space. "What's our policy going to be?" Marcus wondered. "Do we accept them as equal partners, or do we make them earn their way in?" Elena considered the question carefully. The Commonwealth had been built on principles of cooperation and mutual benefit, but it was also important to remember the lessons of history. The old council powers had to prove they understood that the age of authoritarian control was over. Equal partners, she decided, but with conditions. They'll need to demonstrate genuine commitment to Commonwealth principles, open trade, technological sharing, and respect for member species sovereignty. A soft chime announced an incoming priority transmission. The main display activated, revealing the face of Admiral Sarah Chen, now Supreme Commander of Commonwealth Defense Forces and arguably the most powerful person in known space. At 95, she retained the sharp-eyed intensity that had carried humanity through its darkest hour. "Elena, we've just received some interesting intelligence from our deep space monitoring stations," Sarah announced. "We're detecting structured radio signals from outside the galactic supercluster. The pattern analysis suggests they're artificial, another spacefaring civilization beyond anything we've encountered before." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Even after 50 years of constant expansion and discovery, the universe continued to reveal new mysteries. Each breakthrough led to new horizons, new challenges, new opportunities for growth. "How far beyond?" she asked. "Approximately 200 million light-years," Sarah replied. "The signals are incredibly sophisticated, far more complex than anything we or the old council ever developed. We're talking about a civilization that makes us look primitive." Marcus was staring at the technical readouts with obvious excitement. "Can we establish communication?" Dr. Tanaka thinks so, Sarah confirmed. But it would require building the largest quantum communication array ever attempted. We'd need to coordinate construction efforts across dozens of worlds and multiple species. It was exactly the kind of impossible project that the Commonwealth had made routine. The same collaborative spirit that had allowed humanity to thrive in exile now enabled achievements that dwarfed anything accomplished by the old centralized powers. Make it happen, Elena decided without hesitation. If there's a civilization out there that's more advanced than we are, we need to learn from them. Sarah's smile carried the same fearless determination that had characterized humanity's response to every challenge they'd faced. Understood. I'll start coordinating with the member worlds immediately. As the transmission ended, Elena turned back to the observation windows, watching the endless stream of ships carrying explorers, traders, scientists, and dreamers to destinations across the galaxy. Each vessel represented the fulfillment of humanity's greatest dream, the freedom to explore, to grow, to become something greater than what they had been. The old Galactic Council had exiled humanity because they feared what humans might become if left unconstrained. They had been absolutely right to be afraid, but they had been wrong about the nature of the threat. Humanity hadn't become a danger to galactic civilization, they had become its salvation. The Commonwealth model of cooperation and innovation had replaced the old patterns of dominance and stagnation. Instead of a few powerful empires controlling hundreds of subject species, the galaxy now hosted thousands of independent civilizations working together for mutual benefit. Art, science, and exploration flourished as never before, freed from the restrictive bureaucracies that had once stifled progress. And now they were reaching beyond their own galaxy, preparing to make contact with civilizations that might teach them new ways to grow and evolve. Elena smiled as she remembered the words of an ancient human poet. Not all who wander are lost. Humanity had been wandering for 75 years since their exile began, but they had never been lost. They had been finding their way to something greater than anyone had ever imagined possible. The exile of humanity had ended not with their return to a single world, but with their expansion beyond the boundaries of a single galaxy. They had taken their exile and transformed it into the greatest journey in the history of conscious life, and the journey was just beginning.